U.S. Bank Voyager. Fuel, maintenance, and more. Managing fleet expenses and payments can be a major challenge, especially without the right solutions. The U.S. Bank Voyager Fleet Program offers businesses a single-source solution to help manage and control fleet fuel and maintenance costs.
Hello and welcome to the State of the Fleet Industry, an ongoing video series produced by Automotive Fleet magazine that monitors the changing dynamics of the fleet market on a week-by-week, month-by-month basis. I'm Mike Antich, editor of Automotive Fleet, and for today's episode, I'd like to discuss the changing market dynamics that the fleet industry has experienced over the past 3 years and which, in all likelihood, will continue to be experienced in the coming years. And this change is impacting everyone. I mean, regardless of whether you manage or support a commercial fleet or a public sector fleet, regardless of whether your fleet is large or small, or whether it's a regulated or non-regulated fleet, everyone is affected. One market dynamic that is impacting all fleet managers is the ongoing increase in fleet costs, which are increasing across the board, impacting every facet of fleet management. And to illustrate this, let me use the words of one fleet manager who summarized her top 3 challenges in today's market. So here's her quote. "My number 1 challenge is cost. My number 2 challenge is cost. My number 3 challenge is the cost of everything." And as a result, fleet managers are feeling intense pressures from their management to prioritize the mitigation of these cost increases. And yes, cost containment has always been a top priority for fleet managers since the beginning of the fleet industry, but today it's gained even greater urgency. Fleet is more expensive than ever before. And again, let me illustrate today's cost containment pressures using the words of another fleet manager. So quote, "Due to the high cost of everything, my top priority and primary focus is cutting costs. Plus, when you examine fleet cost increases in their totality, you can see that we are experiencing a simultaneous convergence of many different cost trends. And here are just 8 factors that immediately come to mind. I mean, 1, we have higher acquisition costs. 2nd, for all intents and purposes, the fleet incentives of yesteryear have become relics. 3, sourcing constraints and unpredictable order-to-delivery times have caused short-term rental expenses to skyrocket. 4, as the average age of fleet vehicles in service increases, so too has the frequency of unscheduled maintenance incidents and preventative maintenance costs. 5, the cost of replacement parts is increasing, and there is a spike in the volume of backordered parts due to reduced inventories, which is increasing vehicle downtime as vehicles sit at a repair facility waiting for parts. Major increase in soft costs. 6, inflationary pressures. These are pressures that are in the larger economy that are exerting upward pressure on all goods and services used by fleets. 7, fleet interest rates have increased, which is now a key contributor to higher acquisition costs. And finally, 8, fuel prices. For both gasoline and diesel, fuel prices remain elevated. In fact, in California, fuel prices are well over $6 per gallon. Increasingly, fleet managers find themselves operating their fleets in a volatile economic environment where they have little or no control over overall external factors such as these. Today, the ongoing difficulty in acquiring replacement vehicles are primarily due to the sourcing limitations created by OEM allocation systems. And here's how one fleet manager summarized today's fleet sourcing environment in this new and unprecedented era of fleet order allocations. So the quote, "Motor company allocations create a situation where I can't get as many vehicles as I need, and I can't change manufacturers to buy an alternative make and model as they aren't taking new customers, or if they do, you get almost no allocation at all." End of quote. Now let's take a closer look at some of the factors putting upward pressure on fleet costs. First, higher acquisition costs. Year over year, fixed costs continue to rise. For example, in 2023, vehicle net acquisition costs are considerably higher than those in 2021, which was a mere 2 years ago. Plus, rising interest rates have now emerged as a substantial factor impacting fleet funding and leasing costs. This wasn't an issue 2 years ago. In fact, vehicle costs and interest rates have doubled over the past 24 months. What was once a $500 payment for a van is now $1,000. What was once a $1,000 payment for a full-size pickup is now $2,000. Costs for internal combustion engines continue to increase while incentives have not yet returned to industry norms. And for those companies transitioning to electrification, EVs generally have a higher acquisition cost than a comparable ICE vehicle. Another area is higher rental costs. Today, OEM ordering allocation systems have limited the number of vehicles you can order, which is often below the number of vehicles that fleets need to replace. Delays in order to delivery times and increased downtime waiting for replacement parts has further amplified fleet expenses by forcing companies to incur excessive rental costs just in order to keep their drivers productive. Inflationary pressures. Inflationary pressures such as increasing costs for replacement parts are impacting all fleet segments, in particular public sector fleets. The costs for vehicles and parts have risen significantly over the past few years, as we've discussed, but especially hard hit are public agency budgets, which have not been able to keep up with these cost escalations. Fuel price increases. The elevated price of fuel is putting upward pressure on fleet operating costs. Fuel is the largest expense category in a fleet operating budget, which most likely will require additional adjustments as we go into calendar year 2024 budgets. And here's how one fleet manager quantified the impact of higher fuel prices on her vocational fleet. So, quote, "We primarily operate full-size pickups that are averaging $100 to $130 each time they fill up at a fuel station, with some drivers filling up multiple times per week," end of quote. And higher interest rates. This is a relatively new factor putting upward pressure on fleet costs. Here's how one fleet manager summarized the impact of higher interest rates on fleet costs. Quote, "A few years ago, no one focused on interest rates since the cost of interest was relatively small and it wasn't a factor. Now interest rates are a significant cost when leasing fleet vehicles," end of quote. Another area that's being impacted is the reduced resale value, which is increasing total cost of ownership for fleets. And total cost of ownership for fleet vehicles has risen considerably, especially since once sky-high resale values have receded. In today's environment, resale values have not been offsetting fleet cost increases to the extent that they once did. And this was definitely the case in 2021 and 2022, when high resale values often mitigated or hid the higher costs that we were encountering in other areas. Keeping vehicles in service longer also contributes to other costs at the time of resale, primarily due to higher miles, and on average, a fleet vehicle averages 20,000 miles per year, and increased wear and tear from another year of fleet service. There is a proliferation of higher tolls for roads and bridges. We have increased parking fees, higher disposal fees to dispose of used tires and used motor oil, and there's also an assorted number of new property taxes on fleet assets. And likewise, there's a growing fear that the transition to EVs will cause politicians to opportunistically charge new taxes and fees. So for instance, the gasoline excise tax are forecast to decrease with the increased share of EVs on the road. Legislators are considering new laws to charge taxes based on mile driven, which would directly impact the operation of EVs. The bottom line is that these taxes and fees are added costs, and in most cases are not budgeted costs. And as they say, everything in fleet revolves around money, and this is becoming abundantly clear in today's fleet environment of rising costs. So with this said, this is my final observation that I'd like to thank you for watching episode 141 of the State of the Fleet Industry.